Okay, guys, my congratulations. We have come to an amazing place, Gandan Monastery. If you consider it seriously, you'll see that all Tibetan Buddhism that exists now originated here in this monastery. A couple of days ago I told you about Tsongkhapa and why he appeared. Now I'm going to repeat it in a few words, and then I'll tell you about the promised Bodhisattvas. Why do they actually reincarnate? In fact, Tsongkhapa is the emanation of Manjushri, who forgot about his mission after the birth. This is the classical example when an enlightened person is born. After this soul gains a material body, it forgets about its mission. There's the following explanation. It's said that a Jivatma enters a material womb and begins to accumulate the material sheaths. And the process of creating a biological body is very painful for the subtle structures. This pain continues during a long period of time. These 9 months of pain make the Jivatma literally pass out and forget everything in order not to feel this pain. It's something like self-chosen voluntary oblivion. That's why all the Bodhisattvas who reincarnate in this world need several years or maybe several decades to realize who they really are. The same thing happened to Tsongkhapa. When he reincarnated, he had rather good karma. He was born in good conditions. In the childhood, he got the so-called classical education according to the morals of those times. Eventually, he began the path of Lama, but he was like all the rest of Lamas. So, why did Manjushri set the goal to change the situation? About 1,000 years after Shakyamuni Buddha had passed away, Buddhism began to spread in Tibet. Atisha made some effort, but only Padmasambhava managed to do it. When Padmasambhava had died, about 700 years had passed before Tsongkhapa came to this world. And during these 700 years, Tibetan Buddhism turned into family line age. So, what does it mean? Have you ever heard about Marpa? Do you know who is he? Those who don't know about this person, raise your hands, please. Okay, I'll explain in a few words. He is one of the founders, or rather co-founders, of the Karmakagyu line age, which is widespread now. There's a line of transmission, Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa. After Milarepa, there were Chupa and some other disciples. So, Marpa created the same family lineage and hoped that his son would keep it. Surprisingly, now it's considered that there are about 300 lineages of Lamaism among the schools and lineages of Tibetan Buddhism. Do you get what I mean? Roughly speaking, if I have a son, I'll make him my successor just because he is my son. It doesn't matter whether he is smart or silly. He is my son, so I need to find a good place for him. This is the main problem of all family lineages. When the knowledge is transmitted by inheritance, not the best one in the line becomes a successor. What does it mean, the best one in the line? For example, a Lama has 20 disciples. Why do you think that his son will be the most outstanding? Do you think it's possible that an indirect successor can have better qualities than his son? Actually, this is a great problem which isn't considered by many people who do things in their own way. So, at that time, Tibetan Buddhism took not the best form, because Buddha's teaching became less valuable for the following reason. It's believed that Lama is on the first place and then everything else. Lama's word is law. Now Tibetans declare this. They say, first listen to Lama and then everyone else. And imagine that Lama is a little bit wrong. And imagine that the successor of this Lama will be also a little bit wrong, and so on and so forth. Imagine that 700 years have passed. Can you imagine how many successors have changed? If in ancient times they lived about 45 years, there will be a lot of them. So there were more than 100 people who interpreted the teaching in their own way. By the way, Ganden Monastery was famous for... Okay, I'll tell you about it later. As Manjushri understood what dramatic thing happened to Buddha's teaching, he helped to implement the prediction of Shakyamuni Buddha. One boy gave his prayer beads to Buddha once, and Buddha predicted that after several hundred years he would disseminate Dharma. Then Buddha gave a conch to his disciple Mount Galayana, and the temple where we are now is built on a mountain. And Mount Galayana buried the conch on the mountain from that side. And it was there during almost 2,000 years, about 1,900 years. So, no one could find this shell until Tsongkhapa became Tsongkhapa and remembered his mission. He realized that there's a relic for him. So, on this mountain, he found this conch, which is kept in Dripung Monastery, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, in Dripung. We won't go there this year, and they don't even show this conch to people. They show it only on holidays. So, this is such a long story. Now let's go back to the things I tried to tell you in the beginning. When any bodhisattva reincarnates his emanation to a world, it takes him many years to realize himself as a certain person who has a mission in this world. It's important to some extent. Eventually, Manjushri found a shepherd who had an open mind. It's amazing. Many well-educated, intelligent people don't understand why Bodhisattva can't communicate with himself on a subtle level. Roughly speaking, it seems so easy for a person to get through to the consciousness of himself. But it's almost impossible. Even Manjushri couldn't do it. That's why he found a conductor for his knowledge. It was not an ordinary shepherd who herded either goats or yaks. So it doesn't matter, but due to the fact that he perceived the reality as it was, so he had no clouding of consciousness and a lot of philosophizing. Manjushri could get through to his consciousness somehow, engage in dialogue, and eventually literally make him go to the Lama. So, in the end, he arranged to meet Tsongkhapa. If I'm not mistaken, the discussion between the shepherd and future Tsongkhapa lasted several years. The shepherd transferred the knowledge which allowed Tsongkhapa to remember who he was. It's important to some extent. Then a classic system appeared, and Tsongkhapa was like an evolutionary. Mind you, I said an evolutionary, but not a revolutionary. What do revolutionaries usually do? They say, we'll destroy this world and then build a new one. They act through destruction, and evolutionaries do another thing. They transform things without their destruction. And Tsongkhapa managed to do it. He managed to persuade many Tibetan lamas of that time to abandon the views that were roughly speaking in their clans, because he began to quote the sutras of Buddha. He told them, there's your point of view and there's a view of Buddha. Let's follow not the things your Lama said 200 years ago, let's follow the things Buddha said. To understand the essence, only after that Tsongkhapa managed to change the Tibetans' outlook, though probably they still ate meat and drank junk at holidays. Here the most dramatic thing was that Bon religion was very popular, and 600 years ago, Tibetan Buddhism was completely mixed with Bon. There were 50% of Bon and 50% of Buddhism. For example, this year we haven't seen that, but when the last time we came to Samye and walked through the gates, we saw a very large batch of bread products in the shape of severed limbs of animals. Just imagine the animals' thighs painted in red like meat. So they make these leg waters, perform puja, and then eat them. Why don't they make just bread? They need to make the bread in the shape of meat in order to eat it. So this is such a peculiar tradition, and unfortunately there were a lot of very strange stuff in Buddhism of that time. Actually, I don't want to say any acute things, although, as is described, the form Buddhism took before Tsongkhapa was really dramatic. Nevertheless, I don't want to say some negative things. I'd like to tell you about a little bit different things. And if you want to sort out those issues, please read the texts that have preserved till nowadays. You'll be surprised. So, guys, do you have any comments on this part of the lecture? Yes, you are perfectly right. In that reincarnation, Manjushri also had a physical body. Apparently, he had a certain mission. However, he achieved his full potential only after some time. Yes, that was the emanation of Tsongkhapa even then. That's right. There's another issue, but it's controversial, so let's not consider it, especially on camera. Guys, do you have any other questions? Now let's talk about Bodhisattvas, the topic we agreed to discuss yesterday. Who are the Bodhisattvas? And why is the path of Bodhisattvas so important according to the words of Buddha? It's said in Lotus Sutra, when Buddha was going to leave this world, he told the monks the bitter truth, which they didn't want to hear. Just think about it. Buddha was disseminating knowledge during 40 years, but in the end of his life he said, "The Dharma I taught only Bodhisattvas, and these are two diametrically opposed camps." Bodhisattvas are the people who reincarnated at that time. I don't mean such great persons who literally materialized in front of Buddha during his lectures. For example, Ajita, the future Buddha Maitreya, or such bodhisattvas as Vimalakirti and Manjushri who really appeared in front of Buddha during certain lectures. But there were a lot of bodhisattvas who had a physical body. They were laymen who live a full life. A vivid example is Vimalakirti. If you read about him, you'll understand who bodhisattvas are and what path they walk. They walk the path that is acute in some way. Find Vimalakirti Sutra on the internet. There are several translations into Russian. I don't recommend the translation by the agency Elim. That's a literal translation where the essence was lost. There are more or less adequate translations from English. They allow you to realize how Vimalakirti lived. That's very impressive. Bodhisattvas, roughly speaking, try to be closer to people. They take a human form, live an ordinary life, but they try to help people using different tools. There's an important point. It's better not to consider the tools bodhisattvas use. For example, there was a vivid incident in Vimalakirti Sutra when Manjushri asked Vimalakirti a question about bodhisattvas. Vimalakirti gave a very wise answer. Let's not discuss the actions of the bodhisattvas. Why? He said that because an outside observer will never be able to understand the actions of bodhisattvas because of the limitations of his mind. For the vast majority of people, the concepts of good and evil stem from what is happiness and what is grief for them. People cling to sweet things and run away from bitter ones. Do you understand the logic? The point is that people very often develop through some bitter things. You can't develop through something sweet. That's why sometimes bodhisattvas use the tools which people don't like. As an example, the relationship between Vimalakirti and Buddha's disciples may be cited. There's Shakyamuni Buddha, a great personality. He has a huge number of disciples. However, when Vimalakirti appeared at certain moments of the life of these disciples and began to talk to them, he literally made them shocked because he broke their stereotypes. There's one vivid example. Once, two disciples of Buddha did something dumb. So, there are certain prescriptions for the monks. And these two disciples, so to say, had a good time. And they came to Ananda as to the most important person after Buddha, said that they made a mistake and asked him what to do. Maybe they came to Buddha, I don't remember exactly, but eventually Ananda decided to return them to the righteous path. Ananda only began to say, "So now you have to take the penance and begin to do some things." Suddenly, Vimalakirti materialized. He literally appeared out of the air and said, "Ananda, wait. Katya, do you remember what phrase he said?" He said something like this: "Don't limit their mind, because if you impose penance on them..." Excuse me. I'll rephrase this as I don't remember what he said word for word. But the point is, if you always adhere to certain initial views, you won't evolve. Vimalakirti advised Ananda to reach Samadhi and see the essence of these souls, because not everyone needs to follow the path of those who live smoothly and righteously. There are some people who need to walk on smooth path, and it's their mission. Don't take me wrong, I can't call things by their proper names, because there's a chance that each of you will understand it in your own way. But if I rephrase it, the point is, if a person violates some prescriptions, it's possible this violation makes sense even not for this person, but for someone who will get good because someone else violated the prescription. Do you understand the logic? So the essence is this. There's a dilemma. If two mice are put in a glass jar with poison, one of these mice will eat this poison anyway. And the mouse which eats the poison, understanding what it does, will bring good to that one which wouldn't even understand what it does. Probably it's not clear for everyone. In short, many of those who drink alcohol and do some indecent things bring benefit to those who won't withstand and break if they do the same thing. Yes, they take it upon themselves. But the problem is, when the Bodhisattvas take upon themselves such passions, the inner world changes. This Bodhisattva will have to do some austerities for a long time in order to become adequate. There are the object A and the object B. The object A will break, roughly speaking. So he won't survive after that. He'll become addicted. But as the object B was immune to this poison, he drank it, fell ill, but he could recover because his capacity to recover was a little bit higher. In some traditions, many people overact in this regard. The same thing happened in Tibetan Buddhism too. There was chunk at all the holidays, so they drank much alcohol. They also ate meat. As for coitus, it's incorrect to speak about it at all. But I assure you, they really cut loose. The problem is that these habits ingrained, and most of them couldn't get rid of these habits, and Tsongkhapa reincarnated at exactly that time to break these stereotypes. This path isn't for everyone. Not everyone needs to go through drinking alcohol and eating meat, 90% of those who drink alcohol and eat meat reincarnate in lower worlds, because they can't recover after that. At best, 10% of those who will take this poison will be able to recover. Excuse me for speaking about this problem for so long. I hope you understood it to some extent. Do you have any questions? So there was a question. If in this life a person ate meat, drank alcohol, indulged other generally accepted pleasures, then he realized it and changed his path. It means he was immune to this poison. Yes, you are perfectly right. Have you never eaten meat, drunk alcohol and indulged passions? I assure you, it's almost impossible to find such people. Any person who is going to evolve tries a lot of things on himself when he gets a material body. It's absolutely normal. And after he tried many things and experienced a lot of poison firsthand, he would gain wisdom. And when talking to someone, he will say that it's bad, not because he has read it in a book, but he knows how it really works. Only people who try something firsthand often gain wisdom. There's one problem here. You may say that I condone people who indulge pleasures and passions. No, not at all. We mustn't say that passions are good. If a person knows that passion is a bad thing and continues to indulge it, this is already weak karma. When a person knows that something is bad but continues doing this. There's another situation when a person doesn't know about something and does it. But when he was sad about it but he continues doing this, then he will have certain problems. Because he will have to condone his passions, and he will argue with those who will say that the passions are bad. Most debaters are the people who are completely dependent and can't resist their passions. They take the position that will lead them to nasty actions. The degradation process will happen. Not all people should know certain reality, especially if they are not ready yet, although not everyone will understand that. Slav, what is the question? No, it's not so easy. You said a very important thing. Okay, I'll repeat the question. So, here's the point. Slava read Vimalakirti Sutra. He asked, Andrei, why did it happen? Manjushri is the emanation of wisdom. So, this is the most enlightened emanation that could ever exist. But when he engaged in discussion with Vimalakirti, according to their dispute, it turns out that Manjushri lose Vimalakirti in wisdom. This is the key point. Actually, Manjushri and Vimalakirti are almost the same hypostasis at subtle level, and they were talking with each other like one was talking to himself, only in order to allow all people around to consider different views on reality. But this is not the only thing. Vimalakirti Sutra will exist in the world that is seen or drishya. That is the world we live in. It is called drishya or what is seen, and there's the world we can't see. It's called subtle world. By the way, as for the Lotus Sutra, it has only 28 chapters in our human world that we see. But it has more than 200 chapters in the subtle world, the world of gods, because there's no essence of Lotus Sutra in the human world. The sutra contains the events that took place at that time, but philosophical disputes when Buddha said how Bodhisattvas should act are not written. But the gods can know this. So this is the difference. That's why Bodhisattvas or advanced practitioners talked to each other not to sort out their relationship. They talked for the others, so that the others will hear something and be able to enlighten a little bit. Do you understand that? Manjushri actually is very wise. If you see tankas, you'll notice that Manjushri is usually depicted with a flaming sword which destroys the illusion. Apparently, it's very sharp. And why did I say that? Most likely, there is no difference between Manjushri and Vimalakirti. I said that because Vimalakirti disputed with The Buddha's disciples destroying their ignorance with the sword of wisdom. So this is a direct consequence of the fact that he was the emanation of Bodhisattva wisdom. And to make it clear for everyone, I'll tell you about Vimalakirti. He was a man who lived like an ordinary layman, but not in an ordinary city. He lived in Vaishali. 2,500 years ago, this city was very prosperous. There were 3 areas there. Vaishya lived in the first one, Kshatriya in the second one, and Brahmins in the third one. There were 1,000 gardens in the city. Just think about that. Can you imagine a city with 1,000 gardens? So, Vimalakirti lived in such a city. And he intentionally reincarnated in the human world only for one purpose, when reaching maturity and enlightenment, to listen to the teaching of Buddha, because Vimalakirti lived in sublime world. Katya, do you remember Vimalakirti came from the word Akshobhya? Yes, the word Akshobhya. So, there's our blue planet, there's the solar system, and then there are black holes, vacuum, and so on. But this is only from the human point of view. But if you read sutras, you always face the fact that the worlds are interwoven very much. And traveling around different worlds is absolutely normal. Brahmins live in special spacecraft in the shape of palaces, and they called Brahma palaces. But actually this is spacecraft, and they often gather together with their spacecraft in order to communicate. Of course, I understand it sounds strange, but once again, I didn't make that up. It's not my hallucinations, it's really described in the text. If you read, you'll see it with your own eyes. So, there's the world of Buddha, which is so perfect that when one perfect soul found out that there's the Sahara world, by the way, our world we live in is called Sahara in the so-called space registry. And now only small Yakutia is called Sahara. By the way, do you know that there are a lot of Sanskrit words in Sahara language? Just imagine Yakuts, deer, seals, raw meat. But in fact, a lot of Sanskrit words and phrases remain preserved in their language. And Sahara, the name of their territory, was the name of our planet long ago. But it was kept only there for a number of reasons. Okay, it doesn't matter. So, one perfect soul from very perfect world intentionally reincarnated in Sahara world in order to see how it's possible in a material world to say some things for the people just like you and I, and these people would remember these things and try to evolve. It's almost unreal in more perfect worlds. They even call us people with small bodies. So for them, we are like little gnomes, because Buddhas who live on other planets, which are apparently rather big, are so tall that their height is measured in janas. 1 jana is about 9 kilometers, and the figure 9 kilometers is minimal, because according to the other sources, a jana may be about 50 kilometers. In ancient times, a jana meant a distance which king's army can cover during one day. So it's rather abstract. The army as such influences the distance. If the army is perfect, probably the distance will be long. But the point is that the height of many Buddhas on other planets is about several thousand janas. Can you imagine what bodies they have? And we are small here. People are like ants, yes, to some extent. By the way, Shakyamuni Buddha is respected very much in other worlds because he decided to help such a world. So, very few beings could believe that people would engage in self-improvement. The same thing is described even in Vimalakirti Sutra. Vimalakirti wanted to show Buddha's disciples what abilities Bodhisattva may achieve, and he decided to feed them with food from another world. He just knew what things were the best in this or that world. For example, he asked the Buddha from one of the worlds to send thrones. When there was a meeting in Vimalakirti's house, they put the thrones from the world where such thrones are made best of all, and many bodhisattvas sat on these thrones. Okay, you can read it, it's a long story. So, Vimalakirti knew that really wonderful rice is made in another world. Such kind of rice wasn't made anywhere else. Vimalakirti asked for a bowl of rice. But Buddha and his disciples from that world didn't have physical body. They had the form of aroma. Just think about that. The aromas were engaged in self-development and ate magical rice. Nevertheless, when that rice was brought from that planet to Vimalakirti's house, incredible fragrance spread around the whole city. It was like in the fairy tale about flute and those who came to its sounds. So when the fragrance spread, all the Brahmins in Vaishali were attracted to the fragrance and came to Vimalakirti because the fragrance was insanely pleasant. They never felt it. Moreover, the disciples from the world where there was the magical rice told their Buddha, "We can't believe that Dharma is disseminated in the Sahara world. Can you allow us to go there to see it with our own eyes?" Buddha said, "No problem, but when you are in this world, you should hide your fragrance. People mustn't feel it, because if they once feel your fragrance, they'll seek it all their lives, and everything else will smell very bad for them." So the disciples hid their fragrance and materialized in Vimalakirti's house. I didn't say that Vimalakirti's house hadn't even changed, although thousands of people had entered it. So the house expanded inside so that people couldn't notice it outside. So now I'm just advertising Vimalakirti Sutra. Read it. I really recommend. You'll realize a lot of things. Let's continue talking about Tsongkhapa, or rather the path of Bodhisattva. Maybe you have some questions you can ask. What's the difference between Buddha and Bodhisattva? That's a good question. So what's the difference between Buddha and Bodhisattva? Buddha is perfect in everything. If a person is wrong, Buddha will tell him about it with beautiful words. The point is that if the person is imperfect, he won't be able to understand beautiful words. That's why someone must explain to this person using the words which he will be able to understand. If, for example, a person can understand only obscene words, but Bodhisattva will use them and tell him the things he'll be able to understand. Drukpa Khenle from Bhutan is a good example. One day, a householder came to him and said, "I want to be engaged in self-development, but I have no opportunity. Please give me the mantra which I'll be able to practice and achieve the result." Drukpa Khenle answered, "No problem, write it down." And he dictated a mantra for him. The householder was glad. The saint gave him mantra. He came home, sat down, and began to read this mantra. When his relatives heard what he was reading, they just kicked him out of the house, saying, "Why are you desecrating our place? Why are you using full language?" And the mantra he read consisted of obscene words plus the word Buddha. So Drukpa Khenle gave him such a mantra. He was kicked out of the house. He went to the shed and practiced this mantra there. As he was kicked, he had no other options, so he practiced. After some time, his relatives saw the light coming from the shed. They opened the door and saw a rainbow in place of this old man, and he practiced really obscene things. So the point is that Bodhisattvas not only speak but do the things that will be necessary for a specific being. I'll give you an example again. Okay, to be honest, I don't want to tell you about the things Bodhisattvas do. It's incorrect. Are they like intermediaries of Buddha? They are not just intermediaries. Absolutely everyone has the essence of Buddha inside. The only difference is how much experience is being accumulated in the past lives. You and I differ only in the things we created in our consciousness in our each life, and these things form you as a personality. When you reincarnate, your passions or aversion to something remain with you. You have been already formed, whether you like it or not. And there are those who have less formations. When Bodhisattva is born, he lives like all the others and allows everything pass through himself. But at a certain stage, he understands that it won't end well and starts revealing of that. So he tries to reincarnate having minimal accumulations from this or that world. Actually, it's believed that ideally it's better to reduce them to zero, neither taking positive karma nor taking negative karma, because if Bodhisattva possesses the essence, he will be able to survive in any world. Even if he reincarnates in animal's world, he will be a good animal. Does it turn out that this is not Jivatma, but some essence of Jivatma? Yes, this is the soul. Okay, and pure Jivatmas don't exist now. No, they may exist. Probably a Tathagata is a pure Jivatma, but I didn't explore him. I can't say exactly if this is true. Guys, do you have any other questions? Andrei, do not all the Buddhas become Tathagatas? You are quite right. So, are they in their worlds of Buddhas? Roma, that's not the point. They don't become Tathagatas as long as they have the disciples who can't accept them as Tathagatas. Remember the second, the third, and the fourth chapters of Lotus Sutra. What does Buddha say starting with the second chapter? He begins to give predictions to Shariputra. He told him the following thing: you'll also become Tathagata in an immeasurable number of kalpas. And the most interesting thing is that for all the others, Buddha gave a specific prediction saying, for example, you'll become a Tathagata in 100,000 kalpas and you'll have certain disciples. But he didn't say that for Shariputra, his best disciple, and Devadatta, his worst disciple. He told them that they would become Tathagatas in a measurable number of kalpas. But it's strange, Shariputra is almost like an ideal. Why will he become Tathagata only in a measurable number of kalpas? As for Devadatta, it's clear. Those who understand who Devadatta is know that he's constantly doing wrong things, so it will take really much time for him. There's one explanation. In fact, Shariputra, who has a real potential to become Tathagata, always abandons it in favor of others. So this is a classic example of Bodhisattva. He, as Bodhisattva, abandons his own realization because when he becomes Tathagata, he will have to give way to his disciples. And Buddha told him who would be the holder of his line after him and how he would do it. And this is also a very important issue. It turns out that for those who walk the path of self-development, a certain paradigm or path has already formed. It's about how long they should move, how they should do it. So everything has already predetermined to some extent. There will be only insignificant deviations from this path. But this is only for those who walk the path of self-development, and those who live the life to the fullest will have ups and downs. Actually, these ups and downs are not like I'm showing. They are in a circle. To put it simply, one day one is lucky, he's on top. The other day he's unlucky, he is at the bottom, and so on. So, if you want to milk a cow today, then be ready to become this cow, and someone will also milk you. This is fair, isn't it? This is the difference of the world that is seen. So, if you specialize in something here, for example, one of the guys asked, if I work only in real estate in this life, will it be good or bad karma? On the one hand, of course, it's good. But the problem is in people who also work in real estate. You don't build the houses yourself. Probably you only sell them, but they're built by the people from sunny Tajikistan. They're working very hard. I had one friend from Ukraine who worked in construction. He began to do yoga, but he couldn't because he was drilling the walls during 5 or 10 years, and his body began just to shake. I don't know how it's called, so probably it's a vibration disease. He couldn't do yoga because he couldn't sit still and motionless. His body was shaking. He wanted to do yoga, but he couldn't. It turns out that whatever you do, real estate or something else, a great amount of other Jivatmans serve you. Someone works for you. and you get a certain percentage of the profit because someone works very hard. And the problem is, if you get a certain percentage of the profit because someone works very hard, it means that either you also worked very hard in the past and now just have this profit, or you have to be born in the future in sunny Tajikistan and then work hard at construction sites. That's the problem. It's not just about real estate. It's about every activity. A good example is your smartphones. Give me please a smartphone, or rather its back panel. Remove the back panel, please. Oh, it can't be removed. Okay, a back panel is strong but flexible, so it's made of rather unusual plastic. It's flexible but durable. I bent it, but it doesn't break. And do you know why? It happens because this plastic contains rare earth elements which are extracted in the caves of South Africa by children. There's a good movie on this topic. Indeed, it's directed against Nokia Corporation. But in this film, it's said specifically about the materials your devices are made of. I don't remember what rare earth elements they extract, but their working conditions are real hell. Just imagine Africa, the caves which they dig by hand. The temperature is 40 degrees centigrade in every season there, and the Negro children work there. Why children? It's easier for children to get there than for adults. So they work in this hell, and everything is completely controlled by mafia. It's just hell. I advise you to find this information. It turns out that now you're using these devices which are produced in such a way. It means either you produced or you will produce this. You can tell me, Andrei, you also use different devices, and your camera is also made by some corporation. That's right, guys. We have to use this because if we don't use this, you won't be able to learn some information. That's why there are no other options. And what should we do? Is it a vicious circle? No. Should we pray for the people who make something for us? Just a moment. There's a very good question. What should we do? If you want to change the situation somehow, bring knowledge to people. I'll try to explain a very global issue, but if you analyze this later, you understand everything. We have devices, cars and apartments. We don't live in the forest. But if we disseminate knowledge in this world, we also get some karma, but it's minimal. We do it not for ourselves. Now, I have to give you the formula how to escape samsara. Actually, it's very difficult, but there's only one way. You should find the way to escape samsara yourself, because it will be different for everyone. Then you should help others to escape this vicious circle of passions from life to life. And do you know what is the cause of suffering? The desires. Yes, you are right, this is the desires. It's the formula which Buddha said, while you have desires, you'll have sufferings, they're interconnected. It means that you should find some instruments to neutralize your desires. If you neutralize it, you'll see a completely different way of living your life. The main formula is learn to bring knowledge for others. Why didn't I say bring knowledge? I said learn to bring knowledge, and this is a great difference. If you are not ready but begin to disseminate knowledge, and most people act in the following way. In this case, you'll accumulate karma because you haven't realized something up to the end but begin to share it. Recently, one man has asked me, Andrei, your new yoga teachers give lectures but they say incorrect things. So why don't you tell them that they say incorrect things? I answered, if a person gives a lecture and says certain things, he or she doesn't say it by accident. This person does it only because there are the listeners who need to hear this specific interpretation of the things, even if this is not quite right. But these people can hear only that. Maybe most people won't understand me, but if you try to disseminate knowledge, then you'll understand why I say this. So let's imagine the situation. Andrei Verbo says, you should disseminate knowledge. And there is another person who says different things. And people believe it. Can you give an example of this? You need time alone, you should practice for your own self. Yes, they say, ban everything, practice for your own self until you reach your full potential. You have no right to say anything for others. In principle, they say the right things, but in fact, however much time they spend alone, they achieve almost nothing. Even if such a person achieves his potential a little bit, let him return to the society and give a lecture. Then he will run away for so long that he will never come back to the society again. Yes? Yesterday we remembered the movie Samsara, which is about the person who also spent very much time alone. Not much time. That was only 3 years. But for ordinary people it's long. Nevertheless, when he came back to the society, he faced the same passions. Okay, I'll repeat that. Yesterday we talked about the path of a monk, because our guide told us that people sit in the caves during 3 years, 3 months and 3 days. But after that, the passions come back to them again. And it's depicted very vividly in the movie Samsara. After the solitude, a person really loses control of himself because he didn't transform the passions. The things I'm telling you can't be realized during one life. Only those who practice it from life to life will understand me. So the people for whom bringing knowledge is the creator from life to life will understand. If you face it only in this life, probably you'll try it and you'll be able to do it for some months. But then you'll understand that it's much easier to be a corporate slave and work in the office. No problem, so it's your path. Then, after many lives, when you'll work off your karma or corporate slave, probably you'll reach human world again, and maybe we'll meet each other. You'll be surprised, but we will do the same things again. Okay, we won't be called the club Omda through the name will be different, but nevertheless the team will be the same. Yes, we will have new bodies and names, it doesn't matter. The main creator of our club is to help others. Only the people who are not different to the world and want to do something for others remain in our club. I don't choose them. No, the karma chooses. Only those who can do it remain. They not only want to do it, but they have ability to that. Because the desire to do something and the ability are not the same at all. These are very different things. So the people who do it from life to life finally remain. So, we bring knowledge for people and maybe not in the framework of yoga. It doesn't matter. The main thing is to change the world for the better by means of service. So, we do Raja Yoga from life to life and recommend this for you. Have I answered your question? I can't answer your question with the words you'd like to hear. You'll have to walk your own path anyway. And do you have the time to improve this life? Because the situation in the world is developing so that I just get scared. Recently, I've read the news that Katya sent me. It's about what is happening in Russia now. Vladimir Putin granted amnesty to the woman who was put in prison for 7 years because she sent SMS. It's not a joke. So, your friend from Georgia sent her SMS with a question, and that woman lived in Sochi. So, he asked her, are tanks really rolling in Sochi? She answered, yes, there's a column of tanks on the station platform. So, she wrote that in SMS. After 6 years, that SMS was found. This woman was also found. They organized just a great operation. There was a special unit for a quick reaction. As it turned out, she violated... No, it's not about disclosing state military secret. She was just a local market seller. It's called... just a moment. Maybe informing the enemy? No, there was such an absurd term. Is it high treason? Yes, there was something like high treason. I don't remember exactly. Just imagine, she got 7 years for SMS, and it's the 21st century. And was she the only one who was imprisoned? There were several women who got real prison terms. When I read it, I was surprised, and Katya asked me, Andrei, does it really happen now time? How is that possible? And we do yoga. How is that even possible? Terrible things are happening in the world. Yes, surprising things are happening in this world. But let's get back. Well, people being near each other will live in parallel realities anyway. That's the way the world works. You can meet each other in the shops, for example, but that will be parallel realities anyway. How to change the situation? Change yourself. It's impossible to force someone to start self-development. Nevertheless, if you quietly change yourself for the better, you'll see the results sooner or later. There are a lot of examples of the fact that people who changed themselves saw how the atmosphere around changed too. There are a huge number of examples of when one from the family becomes a vegetarian. What does he face during the first years? So, you know what a vegetarian faces. About 90% of vegetarians face that, but after some time, if he endures and behaves adequately, many will stop eating meat. That's a fact, although everybody resists at first. So, how to change the situation? Change yourself. It's impossible to force someone to change. Actually, not the yogis should do that. By the way, Ganden Monastery became famous for its bellicose monks. Sometimes they even came to blows. They really fought each other when they were arguing about some philosophical issues. So, when the Chinese People's Liberation Army, have I called it correctly? Is it usually called this? Haven't I mixed up anything? Yes, liberation is the key word. That's the main thing. Liberation Army. Yes. So when they came here, they were met with firearms. And Chinese made a very simple thing. They brought howitzers to the hill and totally destroyed the whole monastery. Everything you see was rebuilt later, approximately in the 80s. By the way, why did these bellicose monks argue? They argued about the paradigm that Lama's words should be on the first place. So they meant, you are like a fool. You won't understand what was written in sutras of Buddha anyway. That's why you must ask Lama. Lama knows exactly. But imagine that Lama doesn't fully understand anything. So he forms the illusion, and I told you about it. So several groups that followed the guidance of this that Lama appeared in Ganden. So for them, Buddha's teaching was what the Lama said. And that's all, actually, that's a great problem. So guys, never take my lectures on trust. The things you heard in my lectures are just my opinion. Read original sources and you'll be happy. Probably the time is coming to an end. What time is it? 55 minutes. Oh, just great, and we will have 2 more lectures here. Yes, we will definitely have one, and if Nastya is ready, then there will be 2 lectures. And there will be also Sasha's lecture. Yes, Sasha is ready. And I mean, other Nastya, she took the initiative and decided to tell something. So, we were going to talk about Bodhisattvas. Can you formulate what you understood? Because I told you many different things. Who can tell what's the difference between Bodhisattva and Buddha? Okay, please speak not one at a time. Bodhisattva uses different available tools to convey something to a recipient using the language which he will be able to understand, or maybe some motivating tools. Andrei. And Buddha also used expedient means. And division into Theravada and Mahayana is the same thing. Slava, that's an important point. There's such a concept, qualification. When Buddha achieved certain qualification, he communicates with a certain audience that can understand the language of this qualification. And this audience is very small. A person should have a certain level of education to understand Buddha. But Bodhisattvas help all the others using the language which these beings can understand. Why is there such a concept that Padmasambhava is the emanation of Shakyamuni Buddha? Buddha always did good, and if you read what Padmasambhava did, you will realize that no one would understand Buddha if he acted in such a way. I'll give you one example. It's harsh but real. Padmasambhava came to Tibet. and their one arrogant queen reigned. She was just inadequate. What did he do? He fell in love with her, and after that she completely changed her outlook. She sided with Padmasambhava for some time, and then certain reforms started. And the reforms were necessary only to preserve Buddha's teaching in Tibet, because he knew that everything would be destroyed completely in India. And could Padmasambhava do things differently? Of course he could. He could destroy everything, but this is not the way. He wanted to do it peacefully, so he used the method which is also not for everyone. Can Bodhisattva go to any level? Yes, Bodhisattva can get down to any level, and as for getting up, let's see how it happens in life. If a soul specializes on a certain road, it literally grows into it so much that it becomes very difficult to get up. There is one metaphor which explains the path of Bodhisattva. For example, there is a forest near the river, and fires broke out there. And there is a huge amount of living beings on the bank of the river. They want to go to the other bank, but they can't. And suddenly a boatman from the other bank appears, comes to this bank, takes those whom he can take, and goes to the other bank. And there is an oasis on that bank. Everything is just wonderful. Of course, the boatman can stay there and he'll be okay, but he can't do it because he knows that people will cry and suffer there. So he comes back, takes people to the other bank again. And this boatman is Bodhisattva. He constantly reincarnates in the material world to take the souls from there, or at least show them the path they can move. Do you have any other questions? How can we identify Bodhisattva? It's impossible. Bodhisattvas don't identify themselves as such. They live like all the others, but they have one feature. Sometimes Bodhisattvas do the things they regret later. They think, why have I done that? I have got into a mess again. Why couldn't I ignore that? So they do the things dictated not by the mind. They don't use the mind when they begin to do something. Actually, it's very easy to confuse Bodhisattva and demon, because sometimes demons also act emotionally. Something got into him and he began to act as demon. Nevertheless, it's necessary to consider the result of the action. The actions of Bodhisattva and demon can be very similar, only the result will be different. Can we consider altruism the feature of Bodhisattva? Yes, thank you, Katya. This is altruism that distinguishes Bodhisattva from the average person. So, to what extent you are not involved in the things you do? If you want something only for yourself and ask, why don't I have this and that thing, or why doesn't that thing happen to me? This is not the path of Bodhisattva. This is the path of demon features that penetrate into a person like an infection. That's why a person demands something for himself, or he isn't satisfied with the situation around him, and Bodhisattvas live very modestly. For example, they can be doctors who don't do yoga at all, but they faithfully do their duty. As for the doctors, that's a very difficult subject. If the doctors help those who accumulate bad karma, they will also be responsible for that. I can give you an example. I have one friend. He's a professional surgeon. He has really magical hands. So he performed just filigree surgeries. But he's a surgeon. Probably it tells you nothing. All the surgeons drink very much alcohol. Maybe not all of them, but 95% of doctors drink a lot. And my friend drank himself to death. I even don't want to tell you about the things he did in that state. He did just crazy things. But he had magical hands. Why does it happen? When I asked him, why are you doing this? He said, I don't know, I just can't help it. And he's a very smart person. I'll explain you why he did it. He helps those who don't control themselves. This exchange of motivations influences a doctor. If a doctor helped only saints, he would also become saint. But if he helps those who are deep in passions, it's just hardcore. I'll give you another example about doctors. It's also very striking. I had one good friend. She was a dentist. She treated people and loved her job very much. She helped people very sincerely. She fixed teeth of many yogis for free in Moscow. I got acquainted with her because I was told that there was a dentist who fixed teeth excellently and did it for free if you are a yogi. When she started doing yoga, she began to identify two categories of patients. One of them was bandits, and the other one was policemen, as she called them in a word, just policemen. And she said, when I fixed one's tooth, I need a whole week for recovery, so I can't get up early in the morning, it's really hardcore. And she had the statistic. When normal people came to her, she felt good. But when a peculiar person came to her and she fixed his teeth, she has to recover. And she realized that even having favorite job, she did something wrong. And now she's a famous yoga teacher in her narrowly focused sphere. And she is happy in her own way. What about lamas who govern a state and whom we talked about yesterday? And how has this turned out? Did they accumulate karma? Surely, I gave you the example. There's the system of Dalai Lamas. One dies and then he reincarnates again. But there were two lamas. One of them just disappeared, and the other one became literally a playboy and ended up not how it was planned. Nevertheless, they found another lama and made him a viceroy for political reasons. There's another example about Mongolia. Mongols had been ruling Tibet for many years. That was allegedly Mongol-Tatar yoke, as it's called now. Actually, they were called Magal, not Mongol. It's not the same. At a certain stage, when Lamaism began to spread in Mongolia, the children of the chief of the state, Great Khural, were recognized as the reincarnation of this Dalai Lama automatically. And that was done only to rule the people in religious terms. And we discussed that there's a great number of religious movements of the so-called family Lamaism in the modern world. They use peculiar techniques which were even unknown at the time of Buddha. So, guys, we have many days. If you have some questions, think it over and we'll discuss it. Otherwise, we don't have time to listen to other guys and their concepts. Okay? Thank you for your attention. Let's also thank this place for the opportunity to discuss these things and all the other unmanifested beings. Om.